Welcome to the March 4th edition of the Index Sports Show. I'm Jack Nicholl, sports editor, Brent Foster, assistant sports editor, Logan Jackson, sports reporter. We are recapping the basketball season this week. The men went 5-22, the women 11-16. The women were 2 games out of an MIAA postseason appearance. Guys, did the teams meet their expectations entering the season?
Well, I don't think the women did. I think they wanted to finish. Obviously, the goal for me of the season was to make the conference tournament. They didn't do that, so I would say no. But then on the other hand, they were picked to finish dead last in the MIAA. They didn't do that, I don't think they were near the last place team. They finished 10th in the conference, 11 teams. I think they were a lot better than the record indicated. But I would say no, they did not. Making the conference tournament was the goal from day one, and they just didn't do that.
Well, I think on the men's side, Schrader mentioned that this year's team actually lost a year of growth. He said last year's team just didn't have any chemistry, no leadership. So going into this season, expectation-wise, there probably weren't a lot of high expectations. They were picked to finish last in the MIAA, and they finished in a tie for last. However, I still think the team did very well. They did pick up 3 MIAA wins, which was 2 more than last season. They only picked up 1 last year. So I say they did meet expectations.
Brent, did Coach Smith and Logan, Coach Schrader, what did they seem to think about the outcome of the season?
Well, I think Smith was pretty downtrodden in the middle of the year. I think they started off pretty well, fizzled in the middle, and then got hot at the end of the year. He really thought at the beginning of the year the middle of the year that it was here we go again, struggle. End of the year they really kind of stepped it up a little bit, won 4 or 5 in the year. So I think at the end of the day he was pretty pleased, especially knowing that they ended the season on such a positive note.
I think the men were in the same boat. The middle of the season they went on an 11-game losing streak, really struggled there. But Schrader, I think, was very optimistic about the team. They did struggle in the middle, kind of at the beginning and the end, but they do return the majority of their team for next season.
Logan, you mentioned earlier the 3 conference victories, up 2 from last season. But to go along with that, the team did lose a lot of close games, which also happened last season, it seemed like. Why weren't they able to pull off the victory in some of those?
Well, I think the biggest thing for them was that they struggled a lot in the first half. They really dug themselves into some deep holes there in the first half, and they would come out in the second half and play very good ball. However, it was just too little too late. I know I talked to Tom Norton, and he said that the team seemed really timid in the first half and almost scared, but they loosened up for that second half. However, they were already behind, and the deficit was tough to overcome.
And then, Brent, you also mentioned this. The team started out hot, then had a cold spell, and then won 4 out of their last 5. What was the reasoning for that?
Well, I think part of it is the schedule. They played some pretty tough teams in the middle of the season. Schedule a little bit kind of, I guess you'd say, middle-loaded. Into the season, the schedule not quite as tough. But I really think that the team jacked around their offenses, switching offenses in the end to a running style offense where they kind of ran with teams. That seemed to fit them better. Smith talked about fitting the personnel, and I think a lot of part of the season when they ran that running offense, Smith said they didn't really have to think as much when they were running offense. They just kind of went out and did it, and I think that was really kind of the difference later in the season when they started winning some ball games.
Logan, the men only lose Matt Taylor in the offseason. He was kind of a defensive specialist. Didn't score too many points. What's the outlook next year with everybody else returning?
The outlook should be very bright for the Bulldogs next year. Like you mentioned, they return everyone besides senior Matt Taylor. The biggest thing will be Vesko Filchev. He doubled his minutes this year, also doubled his points. Had a very good season, so they'll be looking for him to improve. They return all their starters: Tom Norton, Alex Henderson, Ethan Freeman, and Stephon Garrison. So next year, look for them to move up in the MIAA.
Okay. And then, Brent, you mentioned the 3 different offensive schemes this year. And then the team losing Laura Hoya, one of the top scorers, losing a couple other players. What should we see different going into next year?
Well, I think you'll see a team that's pretty confident. At the end of the season, they really seem to be gelling together. As Smith said, right now he's already got 4 new recruits coming in next year. He really talked a lot about depth. He wanted to emphasize that the last couple years, seems there's really no depth. There was your starters, maybe players who off the bench, and then it really dropped off. He expects next year, I think, to be playing 9, 10 girls consistently. And I think that'll be the big thing. If Truman can maybe wear down some opponents, I think you'll see a team that wants to score more offensively than they have under Smith. I know they've averaged in the low 60s points per game wise the last couple years. I think that'll probably be on the increase next season.
Okay, again for the women, this is the second year in a row that they've ended the season on a high note, but they've started off slowly, and it's really cost them come playoff time. What do they need to do next year to get off to that fast start?
Well, I think trusting in each other. I think a couple of years ago they just knew they'd have Georgia Mueller. She wasn't there last year, so I think this year they just didn't really know what to do. I think, and I think that kind of inhibited a slow start. I think this year, next year, I think the key will be that they just go out and play. Smith says they kind of stand around and think too much. When they just go out and just play basketball without thinking about if I dribble this way they're going to steal it, or if I make that pass they're going to steal it. So I think you'll just see a more confident group of girls next season.
All right, that's it for the sports show this week. Thanks, Logan and Brent. Again, the men coming off a 5-22 season, the women coming off an 11-16 season.